Hello and welcome to the second ever episode of Arsenal Soup on Lee Judge's TV. Hope you're all well out there in Arsenal land. We're ready for what should be a fun hour with a great guest coming up in just a few minutes. Tanner, how you feeling, man? I know you haven't been feeling well, but as Billy Crystal says, you look marvelous.
You look marvelous. Billy Crystal, my favorite Billy Crystal movie of all time is Running Scared with Gregory Hines, by the way. But anyway, that's another story for another time. No, I'm not bad. I caught the COVID, but not feeling too bad. So
right, well, yeah. Take care of yourself, breathe,
Absolutely.
We'll go slowly through the podcast so that it doesn't get completely out of hand. But I do actually want to start off tonight's show on a sad note, but I want to get this out, before Derek joins us. I want to say rest in peace to a man I considered a friend. Some knew him as Chig, others knew him as Gooner Eagle Eye. His name, of course, was Chris. We met about 3 years ago through our mutual friend Ola. And, we hit it off pretty well. Did some streams together, always had a laugh. The guy had an amazing sense of humor. And sadly, we lost him at the age of 36 on, I think it was yesterday. And it's just an awful situation. Don't really know what happened yet. Obviously, it's the family's decision whether they ever say anything like that. But, the guy was a true gentleman. My best memory of him was in 2018. We met up. We were at an Arsenal America road trip. The supporters club over here in America will do kind of a coordinated trip over once every year, set up some cool experiences and stuff. And I kind of fibbed a little bit and got 2 extra tickets in the Arsenal America section for him and Ola under the guise of them being Arsenal America pals of mine. But it was for the Leicester game that day. And before the game, we had the special honor of being able to be brought onto the Emirates pitch about an hour and a half before kickoff for a picture. At that very same time, I met up with Alan Smith, who had some things to give us for our charity, and he was doing the broadcasting because it was Arsenal Leicester, of course. And so he comes into the picture. This is the picture that's still on Arsenal America's website to this day. We got Alan Smith with a bunch of Yanks from over across the pond, all huddled together. And then if you look all the way on the right, you see Ola and Chig standing there. Chig, looking legit, standing on the pitch there. And the two of them were just like, "What the hell are we doing here?" but it was a great game. We scored a great team goal in that game and had a ton of fun. And in the crowd, we were just horsing around, having a good time. And, I'll miss the guy, but, just as a bit of information, he was an early adopter to kind of the YouTube content. I mean, not as early as the originals, Bergkamp Wonderland and Arsblog and whatnot, but his opinions were diverse, not always in agreement with mine by any means. But he wasn't the type of person to drag people through the mud just because of their opinions. We were friendly. I wouldn't say we were like super close friends. I know he got along very, very well and was very close with people like Ola, Kenny Ken, Lee, and many others, but we had a healthy respect for each other. And the thing that really kind of lasts for me about Ola, I just spoke to Ola today. I can't lose him. But about Chig is that, he was able to compartmentalize relationships, which is a skill that not many people have. I mean, he could have his own relationships no matter what, without taking sides, without slamming people. And, he was very, very close with somebody I am the opposite of very close with. And I always respected that about him because, I think we can all learn something from that. So if anything, to bring this into an Arsenal perspective, and I'm saying this to myself as much as I am to everybody else, I'm not preaching this because I have a lot to learn in this area as well. I hope that Chig's legacy is that, have your opinions on Arsenal, whether you're negative, positive, glass half full, glass half empty. Debate can be healthy as long as it's healthy debate. And express your opinions to your heart's content. But when it comes to how you treat and talk to other people, just put your opinions aside and respect each other for your right to have your own opinions. I mean, differences of opinions are normal, especially amongst Arsenal fans. But being Gooners, I mean, the thing that I love about Arsenal Football Club is the fan base and the culture and how it brings us all together. The one thing I have in common with millions of people in the world, most of whom I don't know, is Arsenal. And it's incredibly cool. And Tanner, we've talked about this off air, that that's the reason we do this, is because you get to meet the greatest people, and from day one, from moment one, you have a connection with them that has to do with Arsenal Football Club. And why do we always seem to need to turn that blessing into conflict as often as we do? So I'm guilty of it in certain cases. I'm done with that. No more hate, no more conflict. Life is too short, man. So rest in peace, Chig. Way too soon, and my best to his family and his closest friends.
Yeah, I didn't know him well. That's to say I didn't really know him at all. I knew of his Twitter presence. I knew he was, involved in shows, like what we're doing here. But my deepest condolences to his family, obviously his friends, at 36 years old, just far too soon. So, well said. Well said.
In lighter news, I'm getting on the plane in 5 days, man. I cannot wait. I'm packed. All of my clothes that fit me are in there, and I mean all of the clothes that fit me. I'm wearing stuff that, like, if you saw me full body, you've
stripped all the beds then in your house, because the beds are the only. I'm sorry, I couldn't resist.
It's all I have. That I'm going to be walking around like Caesar in London in bed sheets and togas. But 24 days and nights in London coming up, staying in the North Bank of Highbury, where I grew up. Let's say, eating, drinking, podcasting, arsenaling, maybe a little bit of work here and there. Do we even need to talk about Arsenal Brighton? It was a bore. It was a bore fest. 10 points out of 12.
Yeah, I guess real quick, the question is it a step back or is it a step sideways? Because I don't want to call it a step back. The one thing I'll say about the fan base to a degree is that entitlement aspect that I always come back to. The fact is, now have Brighton played anyone noteworthy? I mean, they haven't played anyone in the top 6 that I'm aware of, but they're an in-form team. They've been playing well to start the season, and given the circumstances, both teams played in that monsoon down on the South Coast on Saturday. But all things considered, when you look at the result in context, we didn't play our best game. But I sort of expected that. I expected the letdown after Tottenham, and I think that's only natural. In fact, I remember after the Tottenham match thinking to myself, boy, it would have been nice to play Brighton and then Tottenham and go into the international break having played the scum in that last week before the international break, because it was just bound to be a letdown in terms of intensity and emotion. So I take the point. In some pretty miserable conditions down there, hard to get yourself up for that game after the emotional output that you had a week before. I'm choosing to look at the glasses being half full with Brighton. So that's just me.
You got me there too. And look, this is the Arsenal Soup. We're about bringing you guest content, games. We're not going to spend a tremendous amount of time rehashing the games over the weekend, but I'm pretty much right in lockstep with you. I'm looking at these next 4 games and saying we got to do the same thing we did in the last 4 games, 10 points out of 12. And if you do that, you're going to be in 6th or 7th place by the next international break.
Yep.
And then maybe by like 14 international breaks from now, we can be challenging.
We might be top of the league. Who knows?
Yeah. So here's the new feature. I know that you're waiting for this. Everyone has been waiting for this. And this is the last thing we're going to do before we bring on Derek, who we're honored to have on with us today. Not only will you get interesting content, but you're going to get amazing production values, starting with this. So we're happy to debut our...
Are you ready? It's the Arsenal Soup. Soup of the week.
Yeah! So It's the soup of the, we're gonna work on that, all right? I mean, look, production values are the channels things. Tanner and I, soup of the week.
Soup of the week.
So Arsenal Soup, if you missed the first episode, we described how we got the name Arsenal Soup, but you know what? I love me a soup. Tanner loves some soup. We didn't get to be how we are without having soup.
Yeah, right.
And so we're going to start off with my favorite soup, and Derek's going to laugh because there's a weird coincidence with this that we'll talk about in just a minute. But my favorite soup in the world, period, is New England clam chowder. And I have a chunky version of New England clam chowder full of potatoes, full of cream, clams, and I'm just missing the oyster crackers, but I promise I'm not going to eat this the entire time we're on the air. You guys don't need to hear those noises, but the soup of the week for this week is New England clam chowder. There was a great note on Twitter, by the way, that when we have Kevin Campbell on, Campbell's soup is going to be the soup of the week.
I mean, it works perfectly. So are you now we've talked a little bit off air about this, as we've gotten to know each other. The first question I normally ask somebody I meet is, how do you feel about clam chowder? Right. Yeah. Of course.
Are you a fan?
Oh, massive fan. I will even go so far as to say that I like Manhattan clam chowder.
Now we might have a problem because
I like them both, man. Look, I'm a fat guy. I like them both. I prefer New England clam chowder. That's clam chowder. And I'm sure when we get Derek in here, my favorite clam chowder, quite frankly, is Legal Seafood, which is Boston based. Nothing better than
they have not paid us for this.
Right. Yeah, this is free advertising.
Not yet. I'm going to go ask after the show if they can pay.
Well,
us. There'll be no incentive for them to because we've already done it. But
but no, nothing better than, quite frankly, you're getting ready to fly over to London. Anytime I've gone over, I always fly through Boston, Pittsburgh, Boston, London, and in the international terminal in Boston, there is a Legal Seafood in the international terminal. And not many make it better than Legal Seafood. And there's nothing like
when
it,
it's in Boston.
Sitting there and they put it in a mug, like a coffee mug. It doesn't come in a bowl. They put it in a mug, and it's fantastic. When I've got 10 hours to kill, sitting there.
Speaking of mugs, anyway. You and I are being mugs right now because we have a world famous guest waiting in the green room. So without any further ado. It's time to bring in this is our first outside guest. You could even say that we're breaking our duck tonight. And we are joined by somebody whose voice was created to call football matches, amazing, memorable matches, World Cup matches, Champions League final 2005, such an integral voice in the early days of international football here in America. Derek's recently called games of both kinds of football for Amazon Prime, both American football on Thursday nights and real proper football on the weekends. Currently, I'm not done yet. Currently, the voice of the Bundesliga for ESPN, along with Lee Dixon, he's the voice of the EA Sports FIFA game franchise and a major source of great information on his Twitter feed about German football, life in Massachusetts, and a variety of other topics. Welcome to Arsenal Soup, Mr. Derek Wright. Thank you for joining us.
Wow, how about that for an introduction, Mike? Thank you very much. May I say it's a delight to be talking to two bearded Gunners, not just one, but two, as I can see on my screen here. And I was actually hoping we were going to spend 5 minutes talking about New England clam chowder, because for me, it is a culinary delight, and I live right on the Massachusetts coast. And I would say, as good as Legal Seafoods look at that. You need to go to some of the little fishing places on the North Shore near where I live. Lots of little local places, and just the best clam chowder you could possibly imagine. There's nothing better.
There's no doubt. My dad's family is from Framingham.
Oh yes,
and so I've been up there quite a bit, and you're absolutely right. It's the little places that simply have the best, but you talk about the most popular and it's legal. And look, we're trying to generate advertising revenue here and whatnot, dude. There,
we're trying, but we're failing because they're actually not watching. I have a feeling. So Derek, I swear on my family, I did not plan it this way, but I was looking back. I mean, you must think I am a I mean, and you're right. I'm some sort of a nut job because this is the second time now you've appeared on a podcast with me. The first time was on my Gooners podcast with Andy about a year or so ago, and it was a great chat. And on that day, I went back and watched it, and I had forgotten that on that day I had not just clam chowder before the show, but also lobster rolls.
Wow.
These are coincidences. I'm not like, okay, Derek is Derek, New England. Lobster. This is just the show's called Arsenal Soup before we knew we were having you on. This was the soup of the week before we knew we were having you on. So, I mean, if this is what I get to do every time we're having you on, then I hope that you'll join us weekly.
Well, I heard in your introduction that you're heading to London for a while. It's a shame you're not heading to Scotland, because in the north of Scotland, we have our own answer to clam chowder. And look for it on a menu. You probably have to be in Scotland. You'd be lucky if you found it on an English menu. Cullen Skink. Look it up on the internet. Cullen. Cullen is a coastal town in the north of Scotland. Skink, S-K-I-N-K. It doesn't sound too appetizing, the skink part of it, but it is, trust me, a delicious Scottish soup made of cream and potatoes and smoked haddock.
Oh my God. You see, I am not above or beneath, I should say. I don't know which one it is. Getting on a train and sitting there for 4 hours to have a cup of soup, and I would find the closest football, to there and catch a game.
Well, if you ever go to Edinburgh, to the capital, there is a lovely restaurant called Fisher's, which is one of my regulars in Edinburgh. It just does Scottish seafood, Scottish landed seafood, and you will get excellent Cullen skink there. So. It seems one or two people in the audience know what Cullen skink is, from what I can.
Yeah, we got Mike from Scunthorpe, so he's not from far away. So yeah, we're learning. We're getting new foods. We're enhancing our horizons. It's just the last thing I need is to learn about new foods at this point in time. But new
soup specifically.
Yeah, new soups. But yeah, so no lobster roll for me today. I'm watching my figure, but thank you for the introduction to that. So. Over to you, my friend Tannor.
So that's a great segue. Talking about Scottish cuisine and whatnot. I guess Derek, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself. You grew up in Aberdeen, I believe. Just who did you support as a kid growing up? Did you have an English side that you supported as well as a Scottish side?
The honest answer is I didn't. I was always interested in football globally, but I didn't have one English team that I said, that is my team. Aberdeen, of course, my local team, and I happened to grow up in that period, the 70s into the 80s, when Aberdeen, and Mike and I have probably spoken about this before, Aberdeen were legitimately the best team in Europe, in
Sir
the
Alex
early
was involved then, right?
Yeah, I've often wondered what happened to this guy called Alex Ferguson after his Aberdeen years, I've always been trying to track him down since then. No, 83, Aberdeen won the Cup Winners' Cup, beating Real Madrid in the final. They'd beaten Bayern at the quarterfinal stage and went on to win the Super Cup. And for a number of years, the early 80s, you would have said, that period, Aberdeen were a terrific team. So I think those of us from Aberdeen at that time didn't so much feel the need to have another team in England. I know it was fairly common. There were, friends at school who supported other clubs and they might have an English team, but I just sort of watched it all and imbibed it all. When I went back to live in London, and I lived in southwest London for quite a few years until 2017, when I came back here to the USA. When I was living in London then, I became a bit of a Brentford fan because they were the closest team to where I lived. I could jump on the train. It was 2 stops. They would often be playing, of course, in midweek when I wasn't working, because at that time we didn't have Champions League rights. So they would often play on Champions League nights. And so on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, I would go to Griffin Park and watch Brentford. And I'd also watch Fulham a bit because a very good friend of mine, in fact, the guy who was my best man, he was a season ticket holder at Craven Cottage. So he would often, if he knew that I wasn't working on a Sunday, he would say, "Oh, do you fancy coming with me to the Fulham game this week?" So obviously I saw a lot of teams there playing against Fulham. But I've never really had one team that I've loved. And against that, I've never had one English team that I've detested. I've just enjoyed watching it all.
It's okay. You could say Chelsea. We won't tell anyone. Being from that, if you like Brentford and Fulham and lived in that area, then we'll assume Chelsea. You don't have to say it. Do you know? And I think I might have asked you this last time, but do you have a sense of how many football games you've commented on in your career?
Well, we may have tackled that before, but I can't remember.
It involved some pretty complicated maths when we did it. So I didn't know if like someone had done like a discography or something like that, or a callography or whatever you would call it.
No, I've never done that. But my first professional game was in 1986, and I've been doing it pretty much ever since. So 35 years later, and during that time, I've probably averaged at least 50 games a year. So 50 times 35,
getting close to 2000
we're getting up into that terrain. Yeah.
Well, I want to be there for your 2000th kid. See, that's why I need to. I'm crazy about get landmarks. So we just had our 300th show on the Gooners podcast. Today we're having our second show. So I remember where I was when we had our second show.
Wow.
For Arsenal Soup, but so yeah, that's an accomplishment though. That's a lot of games. Now we have a question from Ridi Sarkar in the chat. As an Aberdeen supporter, is it Rangers, Celtic, or no thank you?
Well, it's neither. It's neither one of them because, as I said, when I grew up, Aberdeen were better than both of them. So I never really took the view that one was worse than the other. They were just the two big bad clubs from Glasgow. I would say that Aberdeen fans, as a rule, would dislike Rangers even more because there is a traditional sort of enmity between the two clubs, and it goes back to really the Ferguson days and a few incidents that occurred. And so there's some bad blood between Aberdeen and Rangers, not as much with Celtic, but of course they are the two clubs who've been the most successful down the years. But no, I can honestly say for me, it was more, my local team, the team from my city, a bit like somebody who comes from Norwich or somebody who comes from Ipswich or, a place that's kind of demonstrably its own, because geographically we were a little bit isolated from the rest of Scotland. Yeah, Plymouth would be an example as well. And, most of the people in my circle supported Aberdeen. There weren't that many who followed other clubs. And if they did, it was usually because their dads had come to Aberdeen from other parts of Scotland.
Yeah. And chat, put in the chat if you have a question for Derek. We'll try to sprinkle them in throughout the hour, and just start with a capital Q, and we'll definitely try to get as many as we can in front of Derek.
So Derek, doing ESPN's coverage of the Bundesliga, I know that there have been a lot of games during the pandemic being, how do I want to say this? You were not actually at the games when they were being played behind closed doors. You were actually in a studio. Now, were you in a studio here in America, or were you over in Germany calling those games? And what challenges did you face in not being on location when you were broadcasting a game?
Well, the first thing I would say is that it has been very frustrating as a commentator trying to work in this different way, but we've got through it. And I think everybody has had to adjust, not just commentators, everybody in every walk of life. But, I went from essentially flying somewhere pretty much every week or every 2 weeks to not traveling at all. And, heard Mike talking about his trip coming up. I have not traveled. I have not been anywhere since February of 2020. Wow. And my last trip was in Germany and also in England. I was doing bits and pieces for the FIFA game, but also the German Cup and the Bundesliga. And I just haven't been able to go back. I, chosen not to go back as well, because quite honestly, my clients are quite happy with me doing things at the moment on an off-tube basis. But I mean, you're right. It's not the same, but we have to adjust. Now, if you see that cupboard just sort of, where is it? There, behind me there. On the other side of that cupboard is my home studio. And that's where I have broadcast quite a lot of games and quite a lot of the FIFA video game as well in the last 18, 19 months. So
it's always magic happens.
Well, I don't know about that, but it's always going to have a special place in my heart. I'm always going to think of that as the home studio that really came to life, because I didn't have a need for a home studio as such, but the acoustics are right in there. And so it works from the point of view of doing all these games. What I should say is that people sometimes get confused for understandable reasons. But with the Bundesliga, a lot of the broadcasts I do are for what we call the world feed. And the Premier League has a world feed as well. I work for the Bundesliga's world feed. So, in other words, if the game is being offered to broadcasters around the world, it has to have an English commentary track. And I'm often that English commentary track in tandem with many other commentators who work for the Bundesliga. So that will pop up on ESPN. And most of the time people will say, oh, you were working for ESPN today. And I'll say, well, actually, no, I was working for the world feed today. ESPN happened to take it, as NBC does with the Premier League world feed. If you hear people like Peter Drury and Jim Proudfoot, they're not working specifically for NBC. They're working for the Premier League world feed that NBC is picking up. So it's a similar story with the Bundesliga. But then to confuse things even more, I also do a number of games exclusively for ESPN. So if they put a game on ABC or on ESPN's linear channel, then they want me to be the commentator on that game specifically for ESPN or ABC. So it's taken me a bit of time to explain that, but I think it's worth explaining because most people don't necessarily put two and two together. I think the pandemic period was a real challenge for all broadcasters, because I've covered games before behind closed doors, and they've been behind closed doors normally for reasons of breach of discipline. Fans have misbehaved. Yeah. And I've always dreaded them, to be honest, because we can't really do the job that we normally do. And what do I mean by that? Well, usually we use the soundtrack of the crowd as our best friend. And we anticipate where the oohs and ahs are going to come in, and we pause accordingly. But when you don't have the oohs and ahs, then you can't do your normal job. And I think many of us, and I possibly fell into this trap as well, many of us during the pandemic spoke a bit more than we normally would. And I was uneasy about it, but there's always that sort of fear of additional silence too. What I did enjoy, and I didn't know it would really be part of our life in the pandemic, I did enjoy listening to instructions coming from the touchlines. Yeah. And that was something a bit different. And in the Bundesliga, obviously it's German, and luckily I'm a German speaker, so I can understand what's being said on that basis. And that was an insight, a window into a world that we hadn't really been part of as well. And I know it was the same for colleagues who covered the Premier League. So I think all in all, it was about adapting to new circumstances. And as I say, I'm sort of still in this halfway house situation of broadcasting for the most part from home. And I'm honestly not sure, as things stand now, when that will change.
Well, do you get are you missing the sense of what's happening off the ball? Does that really, far off the ball, does that come to, do you have a video feed that's wider than what's shown on television, or are you just literally seeing what we're seeing at the time that we're seeing it?
It depends on the broadcaster, and it depends on the game. For example, during the Euros, we were very lucky. We had multiple feeds on multiple monitors. So that was a godsend, really, to be able to see substitutes warming up, to be able to see what the coaches are doing, to be able to see who they're addressing, to have a look at the wider tactical feed, especially for a co-commentator. That is worth its weight in gold. And with the Bundesliga, we have a wide tactical feed as well, but there are other broadcasters who don't offer that. And my colleague Ian Darke, who I think, Mike, you've had on your show before as well. Ian's maybe my best friend in the business.
Thanks to you, we have, yes.
Yeah, well, Ian is just a great guy and wonderful commentator. And, he has often said and tried to implore viewers to be a bit kind to broadcasters during this period, because we are sort of working with one hand tied behind our back. It's not the ideal circumstances, and we're doing our best. And as I said, we'll always do that. We'll always give it our all. But these are unusual circumstances for sure.
Well, and you've come through it with flying colors. And if anything we've learned through this process from a sporting standpoint is how much better the game truly is with supporters in the building.
It's not even close. It's not even close.
I mean, the purity of the game. Yeah, maybe you hear the coach talking, but the raw emotion. I mean, it felt like we watched a year and a half worth of training exercises, and now it's just completely back. So I try to watch Bundesliga games when I can. I honestly don't get to them as often as I'd like, but
for obvious reasons, you have a team in England to support. So
I do, and and family members who occasionally, for whatever reason, like to see me. So otherwise, I would just be in a basement watching football all weekend. But every time I watch a game, it doesn't matter the game, I come away entertained. I mean, there's rarely anything boring or germane about the experience. I don't know if germane's actually not even remotely the right word. I think that means relevant. I meant to say there's anything that just kind of turns you off about the experience. So I'll ask you something again, just an updated question. Is the Bundesliga everything that's right with football? And, whereas the Premier League is constantly getting in their own way a lot of times. And at what point does the Bundesliga take over for the Prem and become the world standard?
Well, a couple of interesting questions. I think with regard to taking over, I don't know that the Bundesliga realistically thinks that it can do that. And I'm not sure it's trying to do that. I think it's very much into the idea of going its own way and providing something, first and foremost, for Germans, because it has to speak to German culture and the way football is viewed in Germany, which is actually quite different from England. I think a lot of people assume, the two established big football powerhouses and they must view football the same way. But in Germany, you have just a different kind of texture to it all. And by that, I mean, there's not the same acceptance of big money coming in and taking over a team, of oligarchs coming in and taking over a team. That will be resisted by a big chunk of the fan base. And I have to say, it's part of German football that I really like and wouldn't want to see thrown in the bin. And I know it sort of came up in England a few months ago during all the Super League talk, and they ultimately failed Super League talk, that 50+1 is something that English fans, when they heard about it, would quite like to have in the game. I mean, 50+1 essentially means that a rich organization or person can't just come in and buy up the whole club. Just can't come in and take over 51% of the club. So there is protection in place. Now, there are sort of exceptions to that based on historical precedent, teams like Leverkusen, Wolfsburg, who came into being under different circumstances, backed by factories, if you like. Leverkusen are known as the Factory 11, die Werkself. And so they're sort of grandfathered in. Leipzig are controversial because many people think they ride roughshod over the 50+1. It's quite interesting. If you talk to English fans, they sort of see Leipzig as this fresh, new, exciting, dynamic team, and maybe they 100%. Can challenge Bayern. Yeah. If you talk to Germans, you will not get that response except from Leipzig fans. You might get a few who'll say, yeah, well, it's good there's some competition, but they'll sort of hold their nose as they say it. They'll say, but...
Because the Red Bull factor.
Well, right. It's not, it is that, but it's also just the feeling that they've sort of bought their way in a way that's not organic. They bought the rights to a 5th division club and then sort of pumped money at it. And as I mentioned, have, been a little bit different in terms of how they've used 50+1. So they're a hated club in Germany. I don't think that's an exaggeration to say. In fact, you'll even hear people, and you'll probably find this quite remarkable as English football fans, you will hear Dortmund fans even say, if it's down to Bayern or Leipzig to win the title and we can't do it, I'd rather that Bayern win it again. Rather Bayern win it for a 10-year run.
And that's interesting because I certainly have the same. I mean, if it was between City, when it was between City and Liverpool, I personally was rooting for City because it's almost like, City winning again, it doesn't hurt me. But Liverpool winning their first title in 30 years since the year in between when we won our two in the late 80s and early 90s, I didn't want that to end. So, it's almost the enemy that you're used to is fine, but the new one that really kind of usurps your spot, you don't want to see that happen. But that's a fascinating insight on
and I think as well, Mike, I think there's an acceptance that the Premier League is now kind of the exception to the rule, that the Premier League is playing by its own rules in comparison with the other leagues. So a league like the Bundesliga, rather than just compete with the Premier League or try to, knowing that's unrealistic, does what it does well. And what does it do well? it brings through young players. It's absolutely the best school for young players. We can see that. I mean, if you're a young player at 16 or 17 and you have the chance to go to Germany, you would frankly be crazy not to do it, And you look at the English players who have made a success of that, Jadon Sancho, Jude Bellingham.
How
Erling
much of that is
Haaland's not
down to the
English.
training, and how much
Yeah.
is that down to the lack of media pressure and hounding? Like that can't be insignificant, that it's kind of just a school to learn and be appreciated in, rather than being under the microscope that you're under in English media.
There's still pressure. Believe me, there's still pressure when it comes to German media. It's pretty intense, especially with big clubs like Bayern and like Dortmund, and in the big centers, even a place like Eintracht Frankfurt. But I think that there's just an appreciation of the fact that this is the way that German football has to go, that it has to be the league that develops players and keeps developing them. And it was interesting. I was listening to Hans-Joachim Watzke the other day, the CEO of Dortmund, and he was saying that, maybe people need to appreciate more what Dortmund have done with these young players. It's not just that they get the young player and all of a sudden 2 years later he emerges somewhere else. It's that Dortmund have actually done a heck of a job in polishing that diamond, And what he was saying was, eventually we will sell Erling Haaland, not this past summer, as we know, and that was never Dortmund's plan, probably next summer, but they will already have identified the next Erling Haaland, because again, if you're an agent with his eyes open or a young player with his eyes open, you will say, yeah, I want to go to Dortmund. Look what it did for Erling Haaland. Look what it did for Jadon Sancho. Look what it's doing for Jude Bellingham, and so on and so on and so on. So I think that is the calling card of German football, but it's not the only one. I think when it comes to atmosphere inside venues, and you spoke earlier about the atmosphere inside a stadium. At the moment in Germany, we're not quite at full capacity. That's changing. Bayern hope to have it for their next home game, which will be against Hoffenheim on the 23rd. Köln got 80% the other night on the Friday game against Fürth. So it's coming, but it's just a bit slower. Everybody's just a bit more cautious when it comes to the pandemic in Germany. But in normal times, the atmosphere is a huge part of the attraction of German football. And, the attendance figures are the best in the world. There is no country, England can't match Germany in this area. It can outdo German football in many other areas. But when it comes to attendance figures, Germany is tops. And even the second division in normal times, the Zweite Bundesliga, outdoes the championship in England in terms of average attendance per game. I don't think too many people know that. I don't think it's reported that much. There's sort of a feeling that the championship is this glorious second division that nobody else can get close to. The Zweite Bundesliga in Germany gives it a really good match. So I think these things come together.
I've been to one German football match, and it was on the yellow wall at Dortmund against Eintracht. And if every game were just 10% of that kind of atmosphere, I can absolutely understand why.
And honestly, it is. People rightly talk about Dortmund and the yellow wall and the Südtribüne and the special atmosphere. But you can find that at many other venues as well. In fact, one of the questions I get on Twitter a lot is, where should I go if I get a chance to go to a German game? And I always say, okay, today I'll give you 10, tomorrow I'll give you 10 different ones, because it just depends what mood I'm in. And they all offer that special atmosphere. So, as I say, I am a football lover. So to me, I'm always a bit uneasy about sort of people saying this league is better than that league. Every league has its own merits. The Premier League at the moment is out on its own when it comes to richness, when it comes to money, when it comes to financial wherewithal. Nobody can compete with it. And I don't think anybody is going to be able to compete with it. But that's where the other leagues, like the Bundesliga, have to be resourceful and find their own positives and their own merits. And people will latch on that basis.
I want to circle back there to something you had talked about, the Bundesliga being, developmental and taking on young players from abroad and really bringing them into the fore. And Dortmund, obviously being the prime example of that. Something that always has fascinated me is the I'll say the behind the scenes that go on at any professional sports organization, be it, a football team, an American football team. The off season stuff, free agency, trade deadlines, or, deadline day as it is for world football. As it pertains to Arsenal, something that I've always said is there's a massive disconnect, not just from ownership to the fans, but even within the structure of the club. Ownership, and then like that next level of executive, that next tier of executives, and then even down to the coach or manager and the director of football. When you look at a Dortmund or even a Bayern Munich, and I'll branch out even further and say even Ajax, how can Arsenal, or should Arsenal, in your opinion, should they start to try to adopt those kinds of models from a business standpoint for the club in terms of developing players and getting that cohesion from top to bottom?
I love questions like this because I get asked a lot about the structure of German clubs. And I think, to be honest, people who follow English football maybe don't realize just how German clubs are structured. And you're right. The coach, for example, in Germany has a very different role and brief. He's not a manager. He is a coach. Now, he might have some say in terms of big decisions that are made personnel-wise, but that really is not his purview. It falls under the sporting director. And sometimes at German clubs, you have a sporting CEO, somebody who's, if you like, on the board, Sportvorstand, as they say in Germany. And underneath him, you have a sort of a day-to-day sporting director who's doing the nuts and bolts. And then he'll have a team as well. And I'm a big believer that English football is actually catching onto this. They're just not necessarily advertising it as such. So, for example, if you go to a German club's press conference before a game, you will very often have the coach, and next to him will be the sporting director. And half the questions might be directed at the coach, and the other half might be directed at the sporting director. So you wouldn't be asking the coach about the composition of a squad, because that falls under the sporting director. You might ask him about the team and how they played last week and how they might play this week. And so, as you can see, it's much more of a team effort in how it's done. I think in British football, not just English football, but I know in Scotland as well, there's always been this idea that a team needs to have a strong manager. There has to be a strong manager, and he runs every aspect of the club. And I've always said, I don't know, in what other walk of life do you have one person who decides everything from which players are signed to the color of the towels, in the dressing room?
Podcasting.
Yeah, maybe that. Yeah, exactly.
That's the other one. Yeah, but other than football and podcasting, no, you're right.
Yeah. So I think it's something that English football is learning from, is looking at, and the difference, as I say, in Germany is that you do have these big beasts of sporting directors. You have really high-profile people, and in some cases, more interesting than the coach. So that the sporting director is the guy you really want to talk to get an idea about where a team is heading. Somebody like Max Eberl at Gladbach. He's been there for years and years.
How about Stuttgart's sporting director?
Well, and Thomas Hitzelsberger is the guy who's the head guy, and he's leaving. But Sven Mislintat was brought on board by Thomas, and English football fans will know Thomas as well. And Sven does a terrific job there. And I know he was at Arsenal, and I know that for whatever reason it didn't work out. I feel like he
slipped through our grasp a little bit.
Well, he didn't slip through our grasp. He was pushed out the door, but that's
wrongly is what I'm saying. But
and I think the lesson from that is that if you're going to have a sporting director, you do have to give him power. You do have to say, yeah, we trust you and we trust your knowledge and the team that you're going to bring in, because it's not just one person, it's all about the team. And for example, Max Eberl at Gladbach, who I mentioned a second ago, he was talking the other day about Joe Scally, the young American who they have brought to Borussia Mönchengladbach. Very good 18-year-old right back who was playing in the NYCFC academy. And he said, he was asked, how did you identify this kid? And he said, Stefan Corell, who's, his head of scouting, and his team had been monitoring him for a long time. They'd watched countless youth games, and they developed an idea that this is a guy they should have on board. And they did all their due diligence, and they brought him in just as soon as he turned 18. And now he's starting for Gladbach. He started every game so far this season, and he's been helped by the injury situation. But there's an example of how you do it with a team that is totally connected. You need the contact. You need someone like Mislintat, somebody like Max Eberl. You can go down the list, Simon Rolfes at Leverkusen. There are countless great examples of that. And the coach then sort of is in the background. And there's actually less pressure on the coach. I always feel in English football, there's this idea, well, the coach is responsible for everything. So if things are going wrong, kick him out, get somebody else in. And it's almost like sort of throwing darts against the wall and hoping something will stick. In Germany, it's different. The coach comes in and he complements the ideas that the sporting department already has. So in other words, if you're a pressing and counter-attacking team, if that's how your squad is set up, you're not going to bring in a coach who's all about ball possession and knocking it around. You're going to bring in somebody who's a pressing and counter-attacking coach. It doesn't always work, but at least when you do decide to say goodbye to the coach, you bring in somebody who's compatible with the ideas and with the squad already in place.
It is. And I have to say this, Mike. It is so nice to hear someone who is smarter than me about all of this stuff saying things that I've been saying for years, and it goes back to the disconnect. And indulge me here, Mike, for a second, because Derek, I'm a sports fan in general, and being American, I the only league I really don't follow in American sports is the NBA. But in American sports, we have the general manager, we have the head coach. There's an entire scouting department, and excuse me, with Arsenal. To keep it kind of Arsenal specific, we just don't have that, and there's just, like you said, it's this is your identity, with your sporting director, and this is that there's nothing like that at Arsenal. We've completely lost our identity, and I think that's a big part of it, where you have to have people working in concert with one another. Otherwise, like you said, you're throwing things at the wall and hoping something sticks.
And we almost got back to that, like the David Dean, Arsene Wenger thing. You almost saw a desire to try to build that kind of division of effort thing. And then all of a sudden, Mikel Arteta wins an FA Cup. And after about 6 months on the job of actual football anyway, he's given the Arsene Wenger control over the team. And it just – and we've seen how that's gone. So I mean, I have to say your suggestions and your – recognition of how it works in Germany really ought to be paid more attention to by Premier League teams, not the least of which ourselves, because this is what we're dealing with right now from the fan base.
Yeah, it's a shame to see it. As I said before, I think some English teams have been doing it for a bit longer than has really been made public. For example, I know
Brentford.
Well, yeah, I mean, Brentford do it. Certainly, it's a slight variation on the same theme, but it definitely is down to signing players who are compatible and coming up with a club ethos. Southampton, I think, were probably the first English club to really do it. And I'm friendly with a guy who's no longer working at Southampton, but was their head of recruitment. And, he and I used to talk just randomly about German players, about players who I watched. And whenever I spoke to him, I could so visualize the wheels in motion there. And he was thinking about players that would fit what they were doing. And he was the head of recruitment, not the coach, So it didn't come under the technical department as such. So
how many millions of pounds did he generate by identifying? Right. I mean, it's a great shout, because Southampton really is and has been for many years, maybe not so much in the last couple of years, but for that decade of feeding players to Arsenal and Liverpool, essentially.
Yeah.
They were the Dortmund of the Premier League, just without the second place finish, the Champions League final, the glory that Dortmund actually achieved while they were doing that. But it's interesting, and that there's a difference between being a selling club that's really good at bringing players through and generating revenue, and being a winning selling club, which we've seen Dortmund be awfully close to. And in fact, did they win a Bundesliga?
No, well, they won the cup last season, which was
they won the cups, and they obviously got to the final, which was a derby against Munich a few years back, but I mean, they've been successful while bringing people through, which is just another level.
Yeah, and I think it comes down to succession planning. This is not just Dortmund, but every German club. They all know that their sporting division is perhaps their biggest asset. So if you have the right people in place there, and Stuttgart are very lucky with Sven Mislintat being where he is, then what you do all the time is you say, right, okay, when are the contracts up? Okay, this guy's contract is up in 2023. When are we going to sell him? Because we know we're going to sell him. And who is the replacement? And they'll have that identified a year or two in advance. So when they sell somebody, and it's often to an English club nowadays, when they sell somebody, they'll say, okay, we've got somebody else coming in. And actually, we think that the prospects for him are even better. I'll give you one example. Leverkusen, a lot of English fans were sort of on Twitter, English football fans mocking the Bundesliga, Leon Bailey going to Aston Villa for, I think it was 35 million euros, something like that. And I sort of laughed back and I said, trust me, Leverkusen are very happy with that sale. They got a lot of money for Leon Bailey, and they have players coming through who might be better than Leon Bailey. They paid much less for those players, and eventually they'll sell them on for more. And that's kind of the business model. And I know in the Premier League, it's harder to do that because you are trying to compete with Man City and you're trying to compete with Chelsea, but there's still a lot to be gleaned from it, I think.
Absolutely. And as someone who my actual career, my day job, which shockingly is not podcasting. I know it may seem like that, but I actually work with businesses on their succession planning of leadership and ownership. And it never actually, until you just said those words, I never actually thought of the connection to that in football, in that it isn't necessarily leadership and ownership, and it's the rank and file employees, which in football are the players. And you really do have to have an eye in the future. So I want to give a shout out to the crowd, to the chat. There's about 70 some odd people in the chat. Shout out to Russ, Danny, Lewis is in the chat. I'll be seeing him soon. Gary's in the chat. Sean Davies, I hope I pronounced that right. Taib, Prince Teddy, Nathan, Brady's Banana. Some of these people I don't think are using their actual names, Derek. I'm going to go out on a limb. So, no. Scunny, who Mike from Scunthorpe, PW, K Show, and BX Gunner, and I saw Amanda Princess Gunners in there, Daquan. OG, thank you for listening. This is meant to be an interactive show. You guys have been great in the chat so far. Please keep it up. Hope that you'll join us in the future. And yes, Tebow is in the chat. He has announced himself.
Hi, Tebow.
He's in the chat. And that's not Tim Tebow. It's a different Tebow. So we talked about Sven Mislintat. He's about to pull off what many people think is a coup. And again, we try to keep this related to Arsenal as much as we can. Although the comments from the chat, they're loving the German insight from Bundesliga, even to where it doesn't apply to Arsenal. But Konstantinos Mavropanos, I mean, at this point, I think that's the only Arsenal employee, if you will, who really is someone that you would have your eyes on a regular basis in the Bundesliga. I've just seen that apparently he's on a short-term loan, and as long as Stuttgart, I can't get that wrong in front of Derek.
Listen, hang on, Mike. I have the best way to pronounce that name. Just do your best Sean Connery impression, and that's how Stuttgart should come out.
Stuttgart.
You have to say it in Stuttgart.
Obviously, there's nothing better than mixing Scottish and German together. I mean, you just have to listen to Derek open his mouth.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, I mean, if they don't get relegated, I think they've got a €3 million option or requirement to buy, and from what I'm hearing, he's ripping up trees over in Germany. What do you think of the guy?
Yeah, he's having a great start to the season under Pellegrino Matarazzo, American-born coach who went off to Germany 2 decades ago, made a career for himself. And yeah, he fits very well. He plays on the right-hand side of their back three as a rule, and is somebody who, this season has certainly got better. As a team, they've had 1 or 2 struggles. They had an important win at the weekend against Hoffenheim. They sort of needed that for their confidence. But no, Mavropanos is one you would give high marks to. Normally plays with Waldemar Anton, Marc-Oliver Kempf as part of that defense. And he's at a good club for his development. And we'll see, as you say, if Sven Mislintat can pull off that one.
And here's what happens, though. He goes and has a successful career in Germany, not because he's incredible and we should have known better than to lend him to loan him out, but because of what he's getting in Germany from a developmental standpoint and a coaching standpoint. So what you get is a lot of Arsenal supporters who look at him being named player of the, I mean, I'm projecting here now, over the next couple of years, being named player of the month a couple times and having high marks and saying, oh, another mistake made by Arsenal. I mean, I'm not a big fan of that reasoning, but I mean, the reason that he has developed the way he has wouldn't necessarily just be imported directly into Arsenal structure if he just wasn't loaned out, right?
No, I think that's spot on. And I think we see that with players around Europe. Sometimes they have to move and they have to play, and sometimes it's not even just playing. It's about having the right coaching and the right setup and a calm environment for them. And you can't always replicate that somewhere else. But I think in the case of Mavropanos, it has ended up being the right place for his development. And, we're always going to see that. We're always going to see players who maybe have made the step that's too great for them, or maybe the wrong time. Sometimes it's just the wrong time for a player at a particular club with the wrong setup. And, if you're not getting a game, imagine in our line of work, imagine if we were being paid to do a job, but we didn't feel as though we were really part of the plans. You'd eventually get a bit fed up, wouldn't you? So he's in a place where he's trusted, where he's liked, and I'll actually see him commentating on him the first game back after the break when they go to Mönchengladbach. So that'll be a good test for him.
We'll tell him we said hi. Do you have about another 10 or 15 minutes? Because we got some great questions from the chat, which I have always called user questions. I don't know why. But there's one other area that we need to discuss, and it's kind of the combination of your work on FIFA and your impeccable and incredible enunciations of names. So first, I mean, my son, who I'm going to play a video that you made for my son and his friends in just a minute, which was the nicest thing that you could have possibly done and completely unnecessary. And I should never have asked you, but I had a bottle of wine, I think, or two at the time. So my son just can't get enough of Bruno Fernandes,
right?
Not the player, but you saying his name. I mean, it's just, I love pronunciation. I mean, I know, and you've given interview after interview about your desire to, and I mean, it's a respect thing almost, isn't it? Is it not just in wanting to make sure that you pronounce it correctly?
Yeah, I think the Bruno Fernandes, to use the Portuguese pronunciation, I think that's probably the most controversial thing I've ever said as a commentator, because it's definitely polarizing. I know that because I see it on my social media feed, and I'm kind of alone amongst English language commentators in pronouncing his name the way he himself pronounces it. But as you said, Mike, I mean, to me, it comes down to respect. And, I would want my name to be pronounced properly if I were in a different environment, just as everybody else would. And so that one is again, quite dear to my heart. And of course, I was pronouncing his name long before he joined Manchester United, and nobody said boo about that then, but he goes to England, and for whatever reason, it wasn't picked up on that his name actually in Portuguese is not Fernandes, but is Fernandes. So that's really where I come from, and I try with every name. I try to put my heart and soul into it, and I do my research, and I talk to people from that country if I can't talk to the player myself. And I try to be as accurate as possible. And it does get us into trouble from time to time, because a lot of people are just not used to hearing that pronunciation. But I would rather be right than popular. That's the way I see it.
And I have incredible respect for that. And the irony is, I think unprovoked this time, I didn't beg you to do this. When we signed Martin Odegaard on loan.
That's right.
I woke up one morning to this. Well, I probably woke up in the afternoon that day, but to this video message from you, which just absolutely tickled me because you were just thought of us and thought you'd do us a favor. So here was your message.
Sometimes it's easier just to say the name, and it's Martin Odegaard. 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 Erdogan.
Of course, I put it on the loop. You didn't say it over and over again.
I hope not.
It was helpful, you know. I mean, I still don't know that I'm getting it right all the time, but you know, this is not a game where you have a lot of Smiths and Johnsons and Joneses and you know, Feinbergs. It's like it's a worldly game. So, all right, Blurryface, you have just stolen the thunder from me, because I was just about to mention, you know, that we have signed a certain Portuguese player, and there is a lot of debate, because frankly, some people pronounce it in a way that's a little borderline profane, but I like it. So how would you pronounce this wonderful new left back that we've signed?
Well, what I would say about all Portuguese names is that they are laced with difficulties, because it does depend upon whether the player is Portuguese, whether the player is Brazilian. You can have the same name in Portugal and in Brazil, and it's said differently, you know, so that's where it's extremely confusing. But the way I would say it would be Nuno Tavares. So it's like, you know, Fernandes. So the E gets clipped a little bit.
I've heard Noon for the first name, which
well, and that's right. If you're being strictly Portuguese, the O kind of gets swallowed. It's the same with Bruno. I mean, he's really Bruno Fernandes. You know, so that the O at the end is. So this would be more like Nuno Tavares. You know,
well, that's how I've been pronouncing it, and people think I'm disgusting. But
I'm going to run downstairs right now, buy FIFA 22, just so I can hear it on the game.
We have to. And so, speaking of FIFA 22, again, I don't know how FIFA works, but I mean, when my son started,
well, Mike, you see, you have a controller, and sorry,
but my son he'll log on and he'll start playing at 11:30, and like, do you get a phone call, and Lee Dixon gets a phone call, and you got to like jump on and call the game right then, because that seems incredibly intrusive. I feel awful, and no, but I mean. We had a podcast that we did for Gooners versus Cancer, where we had Lee Dixon on with us, amongst other amazing guests, and you know, and we invited people from our chat to come on screen and ask him questions. And I was frankly devastated. This is not to minimize the glory of FIFA 22, but I was devastated that 40 minutes out of the 60 were spent asking him about FIFA.
Yeah,
and this is one of the best. This is the best right back that's ever played for Arsenal in all time. But I mean. I do know from speaking with you that you enjoy it, that it's a neat thing to be associated with. You certainly have people who, unfortunately, know your work primarily and firstly from that.
Oh yeah. But
no,
that's absolutely the case. In fact, I hear probably daily from people who say, "Why do I never hear you on TV? Why do I only hear you on FIFA?" And of course, the answer is, well, you know, maybe
because you spend all your time playing FIFA instead of watching.
There is that. There is that. Yeah, there is that. But no, I mean, it's the most iconic sports video game in the world, and it's a real privilege to be part of it. And I certainly don't take it for granted. And you know, I love every minute of the creative process and helping make it. And it's not lost on me just how important it is to a lot of young people, especially around the world. And the one thing I think you learn when you work on a game like FIFA is that you're never going to be able to please everybody. You're lucky if you can please, you know, half the people half the time. And of course, the thing with FIFA is that I'm not in somebody's living room, as you said, physically commentating on the game. So you're not getting me live. You're not getting me as you would get me live on a Bundesliga game or on a Real Madrid game that I might broadcast for ESPN. You're getting, you know, a more distilled version of my commentary, but hopefully it's reflective of what I do.
It's not always the case, because speaking of iconic, you made me into an iconic cool dad for my son with his friends. And I made reference to it a couple of minutes ago, but I mean, I'm sorry that I asked for this. The last thing I want to be doing is just nudging people to do special, you know, tricks and stuff for me. But my son had his friends over. It was one of their birthdays, and they were all opening FIFA packs together. They were doing this elaborate thing where I don't even know. They were doing special reveals, and they had all these coins that they were spending, and I thought it would be, you know, cool just to see if I could pull this off. And so my son ends up getting to show this to his friends all at home that night.
Hello, this is Derek Ray in the commentary position, and I must say I'm very excited tonight because we've got Jake, Kareem, Felipe, Chase and Daniel, and they all seem to be in fantastic form as they get ready to open their FIFA packs. Will they live up to the grand billing? We're going to find out. Enjoy the game, guys.
I mean, I love you, Derek. I mean, I was
pleasure.
Now, put aside the fact that these are 16 and 17-year-old boys on a Friday evening. I mean, God forbid they go out and like ask girls out on dates or something or whatever. But that was phenomenal. My son's friends just can't get enough of the people I've met doing podcasting, and that was completely over and above the Call of Duty. So I appreciate it.
No, it was an honor to do it, and as I say, it was because I actually don't get asked to do that every day of the week. So when I know
you will now, probably. I mean, we are not giving away any kind of contact information because. So
I'm sitting here trying to figure out what I can get you to commentate for me now. I don't have any kids. I don't know. Maybe I can get
putting the soup into his mouth. It's gonna go in. It's
cut something where I'm yelling at my dogs or something.
It's actually something I did during the initial phase of the pandemic when I was sort of at a loose end for a few weeks, and I reached out to, because obviously I'm Scottish, to a few of the smaller lower league clubs in Scotland, and I said, "Is there anything that you want to have voiced over?" And I got about 10, 11, 12 different teams, from the Scottish First Division, the Second Division, who said, "Oh, here's something if you could do this for us." So I was thrilled to do that because I love football. I'm a football fan just like you guys, and that's my background is Scottish football. So I was thrilled to be able to do that, just to put my voice on big moments and big games for some of these smaller clubs who don't get the headlines, and that's what makes the football world go round. That sort of thing.
Well, hopefully your Twitter timeline won't start with can you do this? Can you do that? That certainly is not my goal. One quick thing again, and then we'll go to Tannor. You'll bring up some user questions. I do just want to bring up before we finish the show that we are in the final 3 weeks of Gooners versus Cancer. It's our annual fundraising campaign to raise money for the Leukemia Lymphoma Society. It's been a great campaign so far. We've done so many different things. We had the 24-hour podcast with amazing guests. We raised a lot of money that day. We recently had a day of giving during the North London Derby. We've had person fundraising in Orlando for the summer Arsenal visit that didn't happen, but it was still a good Gooner get-together. We've done amazing things, and right now is the last 3 weeks of the Gooner raffle. If you go to goonersversuscancer.com, and you can spell it VS or V, both will take you to the page, goonersvcancer.com. You can donate directly to the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, and in doing so, you'll get raffle tickets that you can spend on trying to win any of 11 really great prizes. And I'm going to whip through the 11 really quick because they're great prizes. The first is a first team signed shirt from Arsenal with a certificate of authenticity and all the player signatures. That's last year's first team shirt. You can win that. You can win amazing Arsenal tickets for the game of your choice. Those are donated by Jack Stevenson, who's a good friend of ours. That's a picture that I took from the seats a couple years ago when we played Liverpool and drew them at home. Just amazing seats. You literally can reach out and touch the players' entrance tunnel. It's that close. We've got, and this should be getting more tickets. This is one of 71 books in the world, hardback books given to the 70-71 double winners on the 50th anniversary. It was donated by Mark Brindle, the supporters liaison of the club. But there are 71. This is number 52 out of 71 of these books in existence in the world. And it's a hardback book, pictures of the 70-71 double winning team, and it's a real rare item. And there's not a tremendous amount of people who have bid on it. So get those tickets in. The Perry Groves Experience. Now, you got to be in London at some point to collect on this, but Perry gives Legends tours at the Emirates, which are starting back up again after COVID real soon if they haven't already. And he will take you on a tour for two along with a group. But after the tour, he'll say goodbye to the group and go with the two of you to a pub nearby and grab some beers, some pints, talk about his days at Arsenal. And trust me, I hope to find out in the next few weeks. But just from talking to Perry, there's no one that you would want to hang out with
Did we lose him?
I think
Am I
we.
gone?
Oh no, is he back?
There we
Am
go.
Am I gone? All right, I was just talking up how amazing this experience would be with Perry Grove. So we got a 2-pack of Arsenal jerseys of your choice, donated by my very good friend Mike Hernandez, Mike Hers FC. You choose the 2 with personalization. Item I is a signed Arsenal away shirt signed by the legend Charlie George, and this was donated by Charles Watts, our friend in the journalism community. A disc plate, which is kind of a piece of art that's made out of metal. It's a really, really cool looking thing. The value of it is about 110 pounds, about $140. And Vivek Malik, one of my friends from the San Francisco area, has donated that to the charity. Again, it's one of those things that doesn't have nearly enough tickets on it. And lastly, a small Kieran Tierney shirt, men's shirt, donated by John Smythe, new friend of the podcast as well. So not to mention the fact that you can get signed Arsenal retro shirts from Lee Dixon, Alan Smith, and Kevin Campbell, and you basically tell them what you'd like to have them sign on it, and they'll sign it and send it out to you. So all that stuff can be found on goonersvcancer.com. Thanks for indulging me on that, but we're at $18,000 raised for the year, trying to get to $25,000 by the end of October, so please check it out. And Tanner, we got some user questions for Derek before we go.
Yeah, Derek. One question a little earlier on, back to the Dortmund thing. Again, a lot of people asked where you think Erling Haaland might end up come next summer.
I think the best bet is Manchester City. I've felt that for quite a while. You know, Mino Raiola, his agent, did that grand tour of all the big clubs. And, you know, Manchester City have got to be favourites. His dad played for them. They certainly have the financial capability of signing him. So I think you would look at City. I think you would have to also look at Paris Saint-Germain. Now, whether he wants to go to Paris, I'm not sure. But they're the other team in that conversation. I think if you're looking at the 2 clubs in European football now who have the financial firepower, you're probably talking Manchester City and Paris Saint-Germain. The wild card might be Real Madrid. It depends who they are able to sign next summer. It's always a bit of a circus at Real Madrid. Again, financially, can they really do it? They often find a way. Is that where he wants to go? I'm not convinced. I think he wants to go to England next. He might play for Real Madrid 5 years from now. He might play for Paris Saint-Germain 7 years from now. But I think the next destination for him will be England. And on that basis, I would make City the favourites.
Can you estimate a fee of what you think is? I mean, I know that's just pure conjecture, but
well, there's been this talk of a release clause.
A release, that's right.
But whether that is, nobody really knows exactly what the release clause is or how it might come about. But I mean, I think we're looking at. I mean, if you were to put a valuation on Erling Haaland, and I've watched the guy, I mean, he is simply phenomenal. I don't think I've seen a young striker do what he can do at that age. So if you're asking me what the realistic valuation would be, I mean, you can go well past 120, 130 million,
I mean, he's
well,
got to be
well
in
past
200
that.
million, 200
million,
atmosphere.
Absolutely.
Is there any chance that friendship and companionship with his Norwegian buddy comes into play? And I mean, it's not his fee. He could force a move to Arsenal if he wanted to. If there is a release clause, you could say, look, this is what I want. I don't care about European football. I want to be with my European buddy. I mean, stranger things have happened. Maybe not.
I would love to say yes, Mike, but I have a feeling it's not on.
Again, you'd rather be truthful than popular, and I think
exactly.
Yeah. Yep. This is for Tebow. He's being a pest, but that's okay. We love him anyway. Can you pronounce that?
Yeah. Actually, I used to cover him when he played for Celtic in Scotland. Yeah. So Jan Vennegoor of Hesselink. Hesselink. That's a slight Dutch sound. Yeah.
And Sean Davis. Sorry, I said Davies before. I forgot about how that works.
It depends. It could be Davis or it could be Davies. Depends on where you are.
I've been corrected already. It is Davis.
It's Davis.
How do you pronounce John Smith? You smartass.
Oh yeah.
All right. So any other questions that you saw, Tanner?
That was the one that just kept jumping out at me. There were a lot of people that were asking that question.
Oh, I do have one more that I wanted to see, and it's not this one. Yes, the soup is cold by this point, but that's never stopped me before. What do you think of Amazon Prime's All or Nothing? Specifically this season, they are doing Arsenal. They've done Tottenham in the past. We know that Amazon has done, I believe, specials on Dortmund and many other teams. Are you involved in it at all? And what are your thoughts on the project overall?
No, I'm not involved, but I'm a big fan of the project. I think it gives fans an insight into the workings of a club. And yeah, I mean, they're fascinating. They're sort of gripping viewing if you're a true football fan. And, access is something that I think is often limited when it comes to football clubs. So when you can see these warts and all type things, then you do nothing but learn. So yeah, it's something to watch for sure.
Outstanding. Well, Blurryface, we hope he's in Nepal, so he or she is in Nepal. So
yeah, get some sleep.
Great to have some listeners and viewers in Nepal. Hope that you stayed up long enough to get the answer to your question. And the last question comes from the Pennsylvania area from a bearded gooner.
Excuse me, Derek. It is totally unrelated to football. You live in the New England area and in the Boston area. Who do you like tonight? Yankees or Red Sox?
I thought this was going to be a Tom Brady question.
Well, I mean, I don't have to ask
with Tom Brady.
I mean, Eric, I assume I don't have to ask any Tom Brady question. He's the greatest American football player of all time. So.
Yeah. Well, on Yankees and Red Sox, funnily enough, I was just over visiting my 84-year-old father-in-law today, who is a New Englander to the very core, and he's making his plans to stay up late. He doesn't normally stay up late, but he, of course, will be staying up late to watch Red Sox Yankees. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but I keep an eye on it. And as somebody who lives in Massachusetts and has done for a chunk of my adult life, it has to always be the Red Sox over the Yankees.
And I'm not huge into baseball either, but I will always watch that rivalry. There are some rivalries that you just, even if you don't have a horse in the race,
it's Arsenal Spurs, isn't it? Or name any other.
Oh,
that's what it is. It's yeah.
Well,
it's a 3-hour drive down I-95, and boy, I hate those pinstripes. I hate them.
Yeah, I don't have a horse in the race, but I have a favorite, and that is anyone other than the Yankees. So I became a pseudo Red Sox fan in that situation. So I think that's a pretty good place to wrap up. We ran a little bit long, Derek. You're a gentleman and a scholar and a wonderful person for sticking with us for this long. I know that the chat enjoyed it. I think we had a great chat tonight. This is an example of what you can expect. Although we'll never reach the heights of Derek Ray, you can expect this going forward on Arsenal Soup every 2 weeks. And so, Derek, what's next for you? You have a game that you're called. Are you doing any international football during this break?
No, I'm actually enjoying this international break. I know most fans don't, but for those of us who work as commentators covering multiple games a week, it's a little change of pace and a chance to recharge. So I'm just now preparing for 3 games in 3 days when the international break ends. So I've got a couple in the Bundesliga. One of them is Gladbach Stuttgart. The other is Hoffenheim against Köln. And I've also got Barcelona. And of course, they are a story whatever way you look at the moment. Barcelona against Valencia on the Sunday. So,
chickens come home to roost every once in a while.
How the mighty have fallen.
They have.
Well, again, it's been absolutely fantastic, Derek. Thank you for joining us. If you want to follow Tanner or me for whatever reason, you can follow me on @TheGoonersPod. We do a podcast on our channel, fun, lighthearted. Occasionally talk to very interesting guests. Occasionally we talk to ourselves, which is interesting-ish.
More often than not.
Yeah, you can catch us at the Gooners Pod. Of course, please also follow @GoonersVCancer on Twitter and Instagram. And then Tanner, tell us about your socials and your podcast.
You guys know it's at the Bearded Gooner, BG Media AFC on Twitter. Search Bearded Gooner Media on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel. We've got Same Old Arsenal USA coming up later tonight. That is in T-4 hours. So we'll be back with the usual cast of characters there.
So it'll be 8 a.m. You specifically timed the show so that it's at 8 a.m. in Nepal. so that Blurryface can get back on and
Yes.
watch the show.
Yes.
So hopefully it's just a little bit of a nap that he gets, and you'll be back. So
Yes.
that's it for tonight. Stay tuned. The next show for Arsenal Soup will be on a special night, Thursday, October 21st, not the 19th, because I will be in Sutton United, having my League 2 experience at Sutton on the 19th. But we'll announce it on the socials. Also, follow at Arsenal Soup. At Arsenal Soup. We just started the Twitter account, so there's you can be one of our maiden followers, and stay tuned with all the news having to do with Arsenal Soup. So, thanks again, Derek.
Thank you.
And thanks
Thank
to the
you for
chat.
having me.
And come on, you Gooners.